And let's go ahead and move forward and talk about the setup for this repo, and you'll understand the role that Gemini CLI plays in my project. Aside from just helping me write code, I use it for a lot more. Since I am working on rebuilding from something that already exists, what I actually did was in my original application, I used Gemini to inspect this application and basically convert this entire application into a general description of features, with the idea that if I brought over this general description of features and a general idea of what this app does and how it's constructed, that I could reapproach it in specific using different technology, which is exactly what I'm doing. Now, if you've been a software engineer, then you may already know this, but a project scope document is one of the essential firsts that you must create if you're trying to make a project that follows the traditional standard process of formal software engineering. Okay, so what this scope document basically has within it is it has the vision for the application. Now, it doesn't have the solution for how it's built. It doesn't contain any code or anything like that. No recommendations for specific implementations, but it does list out the technologies that I think will be useful for this project with some reasoning. It does list out why these technologies are needed. In the event that these specific ones don't work for my use case, at least I'll have the reasoning, which can help me find better options. I have some standards here which are meant to maintain the quality of the code. And I want these to all be taken into account as we move forward from the beginning. Things like accessibility, performance, and security, these are all first-class citizens in good, well-designed software. It is really important to have some type of idea of what scaling or the progress of your application might look like. Now, you don't want to be too specific, but if you have a strong idea of like what you're wanting this app to be built like, or something is important to you, you should mention it in an abbreviated way, but you don't need to detail it. And the value of mentioning things for future considerations is that I want to make sure that the way I'm building now doesn't back me into a corner. Have you been working on something and then you go to add a new feature? Then the next thing you know is like, in order to add that new feature, then you're going to have to like go back and make some dramatic changes to something you've already spent a ton of time on, right? But if we know what we're building towards, at least in some sense, we always try to think a little bit ahead. If you know that, then you can make really, really smart and sophisticated design decisions from the onset, and lower the chance that you're creating a lot of extra unnecessary work. And might add, that's why it's important to do a prototype. That's the whole reason why I created this initial version of the application, was because I wanted to make sure that when I built the real thing, that I don't have to worry so much because I've already made a lot of mistakes, here. Okay, so save the mistakes for the big mistakes for your prototype. Okay, so I also have some information about the application and the user experience. Now, since I am working from a pre-existing application and rebuilding it, I can additionally go and steal code snippets from that application and put them into Gemini here and basically have it rebuild something similar. I can do that directly. I can also give it a link to the original repo where the prototype lives so it can look at that code. I will try to limit that. There are some patterns I don't want to inherit, but that's kind of a thing. So these are all the core features here. Notice that these descriptions aren't too specific. These aren't solutions. These are just things that I want. And then I wanted to make sure that this project has really well organized file system, because AI agents are really bad, once again, at making smart decisions about the long-term structure of the file system. And if you don't watch out, you will have a file that is like 1,000 lines long, and then AI can barely read that file to edit it, and it just becomes a whole mess. And then if the larger your application and the more of these big monolithic files you have, it becomes a huge effort and extremely expensive on your tokens to actually go back and refactor that stuff. And when you're the one who's responsible for paying tokens, or you have to manage the tokens because you don't want to burn the earth or destroy Mother Nature, then you should probably have a plan in mind for how you want to build and structure the directories so it doesn't get out of control. Just say it. I think I made a good argument there. Let me know down in the comments. I only really put this in here because I wanted AI to kind of just understand at the onset that I'm not joking. You know, if you don't show AI, then you're leaving it to chance for it to make a good decision, and it might not. And then we have some performance architecture, just preferences and how to build things, because this is meant to be an application that is in every way, shape, or form as much of a desktop performing app as possible. I chose Solid.js because I wanted to have a really fast rendering engine with TypeScript, of course, and Solid.js seemed to be the most performant, fastest, because it doesn't have to compare a virtual DOM. So I think I'm going to be able to meet these goals here, but I'm going to have to make some really smart decisions about how to build and how to manage memory, and also how to manage the database, so that I don't create really awkward, slow bottlenecks in performance or ability to use the UI. Okay, so anyways, security and privacy. Of course, this app needs to be secure. It is a desktop app, but it does have something to do with managing API keys, and that's a big thing. You know, once a person puts their API key or token or whatever into an application for it to use, that application basically has the ability to charge their credit card. And so you want to make sure that is safe, secure, tested, and stable. So, okay, so anyways, we're not gonna read this whole thing here. The whole point, though, is that I have this whole scope document that basically is the overarching plan for how to get this new build of the application to some degree of madeness that reflects the original prototype application. And along the way, I want to try to make smart and economical improvements on the design of the application. But I don't want to veer too far off from this scope document unless it's absolutely necessary. And then by completing the app here, the idea is not just to have an app in my local developer environment. However, I want this to also be an application that is going to be available for other people to use at the beginning. I'm going to treat deployment and platform as a first-class citizen in my application development process. And so when we are initializing this here in a little bit, that's going to be a part of my concern and interest. And I'm going to show you that in just a few moments.